The proceeding will start shortly.
Oh, she's not done either.
I wonder if there's been an admin error.
Do you think so?
Well, if everyone thinks they're done and they're not, could be. And you've got your script. Okay.
Order. Neil O'Brien to move the motion.
Well, thank you, Mrs Harris. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Yesterday we had an excellent debate at report stage on the Leasehold bill, and I was really encouraged to hear from the Minister that the government is looking at going further on two of the big things I think we need to improve in the bill: ending forfeiture and ending the private estates, or so-called leasehold estates model. And I'd like to once again thank all of the different bodies that have worked so hard to get us to this point. The Minister who managed to get the time for this legislation, and the ministerial team that came before him, and all those different bodies that provided useful evidence during the committee stage, including the Leasehold Knowledge Partnership, the National Leasehold Campaign, Harry Scoffin and Free Leaseholders, Hornet and the Homeowners Alliance, and many, many more. And I don't want to just repeat all the points that we made yesterday. I will just briefly touch on some of the points, because what I will say in my speech flows on from them. I quoted yesterday my constituent Karen, who says that dealing with Firstport, her leasehold company, is like having a part-time job, and who is being charged, amongst other things, for terrorism insurance for offence. I quoted my constituent James, who says that he has spent about 50 days' work over the last couple of years dealing with his unadopted estate and trying to put right some of the mistakes made by developers. I quoted the residents of Hursley Park, who have managed, because of a legal mistake by the developer, to get control over their residence management company, but are now still fighting years on to avoid being lumbered with the cost of botched work by Mulberry Homes. And disappointingly, that developer won't even meet them to discuss it. And I quoted one of the residents of Farndon Fields estate, who's had a long battle with a faceless leasehold company called Chamonix, who billed people for large sums, did almost no work, repeatedly billed people several times over for things they'd already paid, and generally behaved appallingly. Today I want to bring out how some of these stories shows the different ways that we can intervene to get rid of this awful scamming industry, which sees councils and developers effectively colluding to stiff residents with big bills and poor services. And the first step is to look at how homes are sold. Numerous members yesterday in the debate talked about constituents who hadn't realised what they would be liable for. This seems to be particularly the case where people are being bribed by the developers to use their own lawyers. And oddly enough, the developers' own lawyers don't always point out the big bills that people will be facing. And that is the first thing that we should look at. The second step is to look at the whole planning process and the fact that permission is often given before there is clarity on adoption. This is a bizarre way of going about things. The residents of Divarna Way in my constituency, who I didn't mention yesterday, found out about this the hard way. They bought homes, beautiful homes, expensive homes, on a nice tree-lined street. But then during the process of haggling with the county council over adoption and who was going to look after the trees, the developer concluded it would be cheaper to simply rip out all the trees, and that's what they did one morning, to the horror of residents. Now, I don't blame councils for wanting funds to look after trees. In fact, I think we should make it a priority in local government finance to make sure that all residential streets come with trees. But there needs to be clarity about the rules of adoption up front, not after the fact. Likewise, we need to stop developers wriggling out of planning conditions more generally through variations, as one developer is trying to at the top of Kettering Road in Market Harborough. They're trying to get rid of a bus service which they were promising at the point where they were trying to get the planning permission. One of the most common abuses is that developers promise that there will be a new GP surgery as part of a new estate, but they in fact have no plan or intention or any way of delivering it. And I'm afraid I know of several of their MP colleagues who've had that happen within their constituencies. Now, the Minister has made a promise to make progress on forfeiture, one of the most important things we've got to deal with. And that's important across leasehold, and it's important on leasehold estates too, because it is this disproportionate threat that you might lose your home over a tiny unpaid sum. It's that threat that enables the leasehold cowboys to terrorise people into paying up. And again, people are being conned really about what they are buying. Margaret Thatcher, as we said yesterday, said there was no prouder word in our language than freeholder, and many of these people believe they are freeholders, but they don't realise the threat that they have hanging over them. If I can quote my constituent Karen again, she says that purchasers on her estate were not told that they would have to pay an annual rent charge. She said the word rent wasn't used by anybody we spoke to. It was referred to instead as a maintenance charge if it was referred to at all. I didn't fully understand what rent charges meant until about 4 years after we bought. So it's another way in which people are being mugged by the leasehold estates model. And when it comes to leasehold estates, we need to do two things. First, we need to help those who are already stuck on these estates, potentially 3 to 4 million people. Now, that could be through something like a right to manage, or better still, would be an opportunity to get their estates adopted by the council, which is what many of them want. But second, we need to end this model for the future. Again, that could happen in numerous ways. We could do what my honourable friend for North East Bedfordshire has suggested and prevent companies charging for things that are usually provided by councils. Or we could use guidance to ban this model except in extreme and exceptional circumstances. In one sense, I don't really mind how we go about it, but we've got to end this model. We should be clear. I'm happy to give way.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to just thank the honourable member for giving way. And he is making a fantastic speech, and something I wouldn't always say to my members opposite. But does he agree with me that this is about fairness? And the current leasehold system isn't fair, and it certainly isn't just. In my own Battersea constituency, in 2022, Battersea was the 18th highest in relation to leasehold transactions. And in order for us to go forward here, whilst he is part of the governing party, the government really has missed an opportunity to actually do away with this outdated system, but also bring about fairness and justice for leaseholders, which thousands in my constituency, like his, have been calling out for.
Oh, thank you very much, Joe. I think what I got from the Minister yesterday was the sense that this legislation will be going further. It's already a great achievement. It's the first time since, I think, 2002 that we have been legislating on this. There were, according to members on the other side, some big missed opportunities when we passed that legislation, which has never been commenced in all this time. I think everyone across the House agrees on that. And so we have a piece of legislation that's already good, but I think I detect from the Minister that there are ways that we can make it better, and I hope that we will collectively be able to do that. But just to be clear, what the people who have been stuffed by the leasehold estates model want is not marginal change. It is to end this fundamentally rip-off model. Now, I asked for this debate to be about new homes as well as leasehold, because sadly, leasehold is just one of the issues that are affecting new buyers of homes. And I've been conducting a survey across Harbour, Oadby and Wigston of the buyers of new homes in my constituency, and I am struck by how widespread the problems are. In two different streets, in different places in my constituency, residents have been faced with sewage in their streets and even sewage flowing up into their sinks, their dishwashers and their showers. And there have been occasions on which they have been unable to wash because of this. Now, in the first case, which I visited the other day, which has been going on about 4 years now, developers plugged the sewage system from a new estate into a sewer for an older estate, causing the older sewage system to overflow with rainwater. After 4 years of denials from the developer, the residents have proved, with the help of Severn Trent, where the problem is coming from. And in fairness, the developer have now finally fessed up to causing the problem, and a new person who is in charge locally seems serious about fixing the problem. So I will not name them for now. But in a second case, where the problem has been going for about 6 years, on Meadow Hill in Wigston, the sewage system in the new estate is simply inadequate. The homes were originally built by Wesley Homes and then taken over by Countryside after completion, who have themselves now been taken over by Vistry. And Vistry continue to deny the problem and won't take responsibility, even though I have seen for myself the bits of toilet paper in the road that have come spurting up from overflowing sewers. Vistry do not fix the problem. They occasionally send people to clean up, but mainly it is left to residents to clean up the faeces. I would like to invite Greg Fitzgerald, the CEO of Vistry, to come and see the filth for himself, and perhaps ask him how much he would like having it in his street and coming up into his home. Stephen Teagle, who runs Countryside, would also be very welcome to join us in seeing this disgusting case. Now, these are extreme cases, but I'm struck by how often British developers sell homes with serious problems, either with the property or with the new estate. So, for example, one constituent of mine in Wigston has faced a bill of around £10,000 to fix problems caused by a developer who left his garden at a very, very steep angle. After 2 years of fighting with them, the developer, David Wilson Homes, have agreed to pay about 20% of the costs, a tiny fraction. A constituent of mine who moved into a new development in Kibworth found that she had got numerous rat infestations due to the pipes on her new home not being fitted correctly. She also experienced mould in the bathroom because the bath also wasn't fitted correctly. A constituent of mine who moved into Wellington Place in Market Harborough had over 200 snags on their property. The toilets did not drain properly, and the downstairs toilet did not work at all for many months, meaning that their disabled daughter had to go upstairs to use the loo. The entire garden needed to be excavated to be fixed, and alarmingly, the fire alarms didn't work properly. They found it difficult to get hold of the developer Davidsons to get any of these issues addressed because they had sacked the people responsible for aftercare on the estate. Now, there are reasons these things happen. At the surface level, there are some developers who are simply more serious than others about ensuring quality. It is not impossible to get it right within the current system, and many do. The creation of the new Homes Ombudsman Service by the government is a big and very welcome move to tackle these problems directly. But some of the problems we see are also a reflection of wider problems with the model of development that we have in this country. That is the so-called fast turn model. In Britain, so much of the profitability of the industry turns on their ability to play our dysfunctional planning system rather than their ability to build in quality. And I was going to make this point today anyway, but as it happens, the CMA's monumental investigation of the housing market, published earlier this week, gives us a huge amount of further evidence that the current model is dysfunctional. While the sharing of information and cartel-like behaviour between firms was naturally the headline of the report, many of the other findings are just as explosive. The CMA notes that house builders don't have strong incentives to compete on quality, and consumers have unclear routes of redress. They note that we see evidence of a statistically significant increase over time in the proportion of homeowners reporting higher numbers of snags, with 35% of respondents in 2021-22 reporting 16 or more different problems. And the report brings out what some of these, quotes, snags look like in the real world. One homeowner notes, after moving in, my attic hatch fell completely out of the ceiling on its own because the joiner had only used 3 screws to fix it instead of 16. Another says, the stairs collapsed while I was walking up them with my son. And the CMA notes the growing volume of complaints about hidden charges, and amongst the CMA's recommendations was requiring councils to adopt amenities on all new housing estates. Very good idea, which takes us back to Leasehold, which I hope the government will adopt. But one of the great strengths of the CMA report is the way that it draws the links between the broken planning system and the industry that results from it. Following the conclusions of the Letwin review, it again concludes that the evidence shows that private developers produce houses at a rate at which they can be sold without needing to reduce their prices. And in a paper that I wrote for the think tank Onward 6 years ago, I tried to set out some of these dysfunctions. The complexity of the planning system directly increases market concentration, and also indirectly by amplifying the land price cycle, which leads to fewer and fewer developers in each economic cycle as the small players go bust and are forced out of the market. And I am encouraged that the government is taking great strides towards a better model of development in this country and fixing these deeper underlying problems. I think that the vision set out in the long-term plan for housing with more purposive urban regeneration is a very good one. And amongst other things, the new Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, recently passed, creates stronger CPO powers and requires the dark market in land options that we have at the moment to be replaced by a register of land options. I look forward to us cracking on with the secondary legislation needed to bring that about. And I look forward to further steps by the government to move us towards a more purposive, less passive planning system in which deliberate plan-led development becomes a greater share of development and small speculative development without the infrastructure that's needed to support it becomes a smaller part of development. I think that the government is sold on that vision. They're making big strides towards it. And I think in the current ministerial team, both the Secretary of State and our brilliant Housing Minister here today have got that vision and experienced these issues in their own constituencies. So I'm confident that we are moving in the direction. And I hope that as the Leasehold bill that is about to head to the House of Lords arrives up there, that the government will be proactively taking steps to improve the bill, to address these issues, which I think, if I'm reading the body language of the Minister right, are issues which the Minister clearly understands and wants to act on. And I hope that we will get an agreement to move on these things as quickly as possible, because the issues that I described today, just in my own constituency, they are horrendous issues. They are people who have worked hard, they've saved up a lot, they've done all the right things, they've bought a new home, and they're getting mugged by an industry which has some good players in it, but also has some real cowboys in it. And as I said yesterday, what the people in my constituency want is for a new sheriff to ride into town on his white horse, in the form of our current housing minister, and blow some of these bad guys away and put right what is being done wrongly. and to address some really, really glaring injustices that my constituents are experiencing at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I remind members that they should bob if they wish to be called in the debate. The question is that this House has considered leasehold reform and new homes. Adam Holloway.
Thank you, Ms Harrison. It's a great pleasure very great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for bringing this forward. He's doing a great service to leaseholders in every constituency in this House, and I can see that the Minister is determined to improve the situation for them, so I'm very grateful, because all members of this House have loads of emails about this question from constituents who are often in very stressful situations around their leaseholds. And I hope the wide-ranging reforms that the government's pushing through will change this. But for many, of course, these changes can't come quickly enough. I want to raise just one discrete issue that I would urge the Minister to consider. When constituents contact me about issues with leaseholds, be it a dispute over service charge problems or problems with lease extensions or parking, a theme that comes up far too frequently is that the leaseholder is required to receive advice on their purchase from a conveyancer recommended to them by the estate agent, who is, of course, the representative of the seller freeholder. Whilst I understand that there's nothing unlawful about this arrangement or improper, its practical effect, nonetheless, seems to be that the buyer doesn't get robust and impartial advice that they need. We've got a particularly upsetting case involving the purchase of a new build shared ownership flat using solicitors that the seller told the leaseholder to use. At no point was the purchaser told that if they wanted to extend the lease, they'd have to do it before it dropped below 80 years. The leaseholder marriage value threshold, obviously. They've missed that chance, and now they're facing a huge bill to extend. As members may know, actually I won't explain what leaseholder marriage value is. Of course, this case may yet be greatly assisted by the abolition of marriage value, although I think the Minister should look at some of the unintended consequences that may come off that, but that's a separate question. But the point remains that leaseholders, and particularly first-time homeowners, need clear and impartial advice about their rights and responsibilities and any pitfalls and possible expenditures during the course of their lease term. When I wrote to the Minister on this point, I was told that we can also say that we would expect conveyancers to deliver an effective service to their clients, including making them aware of any changes or conditions attached to the property before a purchase is finalised. It is essential that conveyancers deliver on effective services to their clients. Look, of course, but the problem here is that few people have the means to take action when they do not receive effective services. So the opportunity to hold conveyancers to account is limited for many people. So I think the government should act to ensure that leaseholders do actually have access to high-quality, unbiased legal advice. I mean, it must be relatively straightforward for the government to prevent sellers from recommending conveyancers, simply leaving buyers to choose their own conveyancer, and as most purchasers do already. Alongside looking again at the rules relating to referrals for conveyancers, where we actually need tougher rules, one possible route to achieving this is an enhanced role for the Leaseholder Advisory Service. So this organisation, as many will be familiar, provides brilliant advice to many leaseholders, but additional further resources could perhaps do more to provide bespoke support in cases where it appears that the legal advice has somehow been dud. And I don't think this necessarily needs to be a cost. It might actually operate as a deterrent and straighten people up a bit. Alongside new legislation, access to impartial advice and support where things have gone wrong would hugely empower leaseholders across my constituency in areas particularly like Denton and Springhead, and in all MPs' constituencies. And we'd spend less time late at night answering emails from people who find themselves in an unhappy and unstressful situation. Thank you.
Either.
Thank you, Chair. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and thank you to the Honourable Member for Harborough for securing this important debate. I'd like to focus on the issue of maintenance charges, given the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Bill's provision to give homeowners who pay charges for maintenance of communal areas the right to challenge the reasonableness of charges and the standards of the service provided. This Parliament, on so many issues, has run out of road. The government has, indeed, if not word, taken the decision not to meet many of the challenges that people in my constituency face. Problems I see every day, like social care reform, SEND expansion and fair changes to SME taxation. But I'm glad to see that the government is finally willing to tackle maintenance charges, and whether or not that's due to the particular passion of this Secretary of State will mean little to my constituents, many of whom are leaseholders and freeholders on new build estates who so desperately need this place to sit up and take notice of their plight. Now, the present system of maintenance charges and management fees is outrageous. A cowboy system with limited regulation has taken root and left residents with no transparency over how funds are used, no clarity on whether services provide value for money, and the fees they're charged are exorbitant and, quite frankly, offensive. And this is in the context of a crippling cost of living crisis and the highest tax burden on working people for 70 years. My constituents, as well as many of the constituents of the members opposite, are being fleeced by these charges. Now, in the 7 months since becoming the Member of Parliament for Selby and Ainsty, I've seen many instances of these kind of charges being levied unfairly on local residents. I've already written to the Minister about a particularly egregious example in Carlton, so I will refrain from mentioning that case to give the Minister adequate time to respond. However, I would like to take this time to mention the Harron Homes estate off Flaxley Road in Selby. Now, this estate has been built for 5 years and is still plagued with problems. Residents still don't have working street lights, with families not able to go out in the dark. They have to put up with roads which have literal craters in them, ruining the cars that people rely on for work when public transport in my area is so poor. I spoke to one resident who can't even lock her front door at night due to shoddy building work and has to prop her door closed with a chair so that criminals don't break in and steal her possessions, all while each resident on the estate is shackled with eye-watering maintenance charges. The lack of transparency and accountability in the new build home sector has led to countless issues, from construction defects to unfair lease terms, leaving homeowners feeling helpless, hopeless, and at the mercy of developers who are seemingly determined to squeeze every penny they can out of hard-working people. This is a sad part of life in modern Britain, and on new build estates across the Selby district, working people live in a broken system, being asked to pay more and more for less and less in return. They have been waiting for the government to come and help them, and perhaps now this legislation will be that answer. But I would really, really warn against any watering down of its provisions, and I would encourage ambition in its provisions to go further to giving residents the support that they so desperately need, as the member for Harborough so eloquently outlined in his speech. Ultimately, I am sure that my constituents regret the lack of ambition that we have seen in the past. And though the government's actions will not go the whole way to provide leaseholders with the help that they need in my constituency, I am glad that they are taking action after 14 years and to deal with a problem that the member eloquently outlined has been a problem since at least 2002. But we can and should go further on this issue, and I am proud to support Labour's plans to make it a requirement to establish and operate a residence management company responsible for all service charges to give homeowners the accountability and the responsibility that they deserve. I support the implementation of the Law Commission's proposals on the right to manage, covering both flats and houses, as well as the proposals on enfranchisement and on common hold reform. It's imperative that we address these challenges head-on and enact meaningful reform to ensure that fairness, transparency and security can be there for all homeowners. The government has started the job, but it will be a Labour government ultimately that will finally liberate leaseholders from the mercy of an arcane and discriminatory industry. Thank you.
Sir Peter Bottomley.
Mrs Harris, I'm grateful to our honourable friend for Harborough and to the honourable gentleman who's just spoken. Both spoke well yesterday in the leasehold reform report stage. And I'm grateful to my honourable friend for Gravesham for his contribution. If I may, through you, pay tribute to his late father, the Reverend Roger Holloway, who got the OBE for services to whisky. This problem of rent charges being brought up matches the problem with estate management charges, where even today, even my own constituency in Durrington, Terry Woodjets has to make it a full-time job to get the developers to do what they said they would do and to justify the charges which they think they're making. I hope that the developers will cooperate fully. They say they will. They've made some progress, but why can't they get it right first time? If they don't get it right first time, why can't they get it right second time when attention is drawn? And I think one of the issues which I think was rightly brought up in the debate yesterday is whether developers should lay down a bond which is available when impartial local authority can say whether or not they've delivered. There should be ways of making it in their own self-interest to act in the interest of those to whom they sell homes. But I now turn to rent charges. The Rent Charges Act said that, except in limited circumstances, new rent charges could not be created after 1977, and that existing rent charges would evaporate in 2037, except in limited circumstances, one of which is when a freeholder may not have paid a due cost, and then the owner of the rent charge, who may have no other interest, can apply to a court which has no discretion. They must grant a 99-year lease on a freehold property. And unwinding that can be expensive because there's no limit to the charge that the rent charge owner can make on remedying the situation. I believe this time for the Minister and his advisers to work on what they know is a difficult problem and deal with it. And if you'll allow me, Mrs. Harris, I'll just try to find what the government themselves have said about rent charges. A rent charge is not the same as, this is a quotation from a government website, a rent charge is not the same as ground rent on leasehold properties. Find out more by looking at leasehold ground rents. Please do not send applications to redeem leasehold ground rents if they cannot be redeemed under the Rent Charges Act 1977. If you're not sure if your property is freehold or leasehold, find out by looking at your property deeds or visiting the Land Registry website. Do not send applications to redeem estate rent charges or rent charges that have been created after 22nd of August 1977, as these cannot be redeemed under the Rent Charges Act 1977. Please do not apply if the rent charge has already been redeemed directly with your rent owner, known as a private redemption. The rent charges team cannot provide a redemption certificate where a private redemption has occurred. Contact your rent owner or HM Land Registry. If you wish to, and it goes on, if you don't know who your rent owner is, you go on. It seems to me that when you read that, you begin to think it ought to be possible for the government, with or without the help of the Law Commission, to remedy the situation. If rent charges shouldn't exist and the powers of the rent charge owner shouldn't continue, act, deal with it, resolve it, and do it now. Because anybody buying a freehold home where there may be a rent charge liability as a prospect has to get their seller to deal with it or take it on with the consent of a mortgage lender if a mortgage is involved, which it will be either for the existing new purchaser or the person they're going to sell to. When we see these problems, don't delay, don't regard it as something which should be NIM 2, not in my term of office. Make it a responsibility you take up now and act and deal with it. And in fact, if the government could get a social survey of people in new estates and see the problems they have with estate management companies and estate management charges, and if they could do a survey of solicitors, all of whom have on their websites the problems of rent charges, get them together, have a round table, work out what will be effective, and just act. Make people happier, take away the risks, and take away half the fun that lawyers would have in trying to sort out the problems when they eventually come to court.
Austin.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Harris. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I would also like to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Harborough, for securing this important debate. And I'm sure all of us have constituency issues which emanate from this issue. And I would absolutely echo the points my honourable friend has made, both yesterday and in this debate. And I'd particularly mention the issue of developers wriggling out of planning commitments. I have several examples of this, one of which is particularly egregious, which I've discussed with the Minister, and I'm sure it seems like I might be mentioning more about that in this House at some point. I believe that the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Bill is a landmark piece of legislation that will help every single leaseholder in Hertford and Stortford and beyond throughout the country. I know the Minister is more than aware of the problems with leasehold ownership. They're there for all to see. No control over agency fees, how the value of the property dwindles as the lease begins to elapse, and then how tricky, often expensive it is to extend a lease, and how, in essence, in my view, it's not true property ownership. I've heard the argument that if prospective leaseholders do not want to endure all these issues, they should simply not sign on the dotted line to become a leaseholder. I think this frame of mind shows a misunderstanding of the system and the lack of choice in it. To begin with, becoming a leaseholder is practically a rite of passage, climbing the property ladder nowadays. So many people, young people, buy flats to begin with because they're smaller, they're cheaper, and then they try to use that as a platform to climb a property ladder, upsizing as they can. That's how I started, and I should also declare that I am an owner of a leasehold property now, although I should say my freeholder is as wonderful and as fair as they come, but perhaps that makes me the lucky one. People become leaseholders only to have the wool pulled over their eyes in so many cases. For instance, I've heard stories where first-time buyers sign up to being leaseholders, accepting the estimated service charge amount when doing so. They then exchange contracts, and when they receive their leases to sign a few days before completion, these service charge amounts have more than doubled. What are the leaseholders to do, though? They've already exchanged contracts by this stage, the legal point of no return. Are we asking them to throw away their life savings, their deposit, or are we asking them to find hundreds or thousands of extra pounds out of their back pockets to cover the difference? Now, I appreciate that advertising a lower than anticipated service charge may be employed to get more sales over the line, but I'm sure everyone in this room would agree that a more than double amount on completion day shows how managing agents are seldom on the side of leaseholders. And I wanted to share a couple of examples from my constituents. One Hertford resident bought his flat 7 years ago with 109 years left to run on the lease. However, he has received a quote from the freeholder of £10,000 to extend. That's not money he would find down the back of a sofa. That's an extraordinary amount of money. The other side of the coin is that the years of a lease really become fewer and fewer, the value of the asset dwindles. These constituents have worked extraordinarily hard to buy their homes, and now they have to face these headaches, not that far down the line. It goes without saying, if someone owns a house by freehold, they don't experience any issues like this. They own a property, and that's it. Another constituent of mine owns a flat with a doubling ground rent, which is currently £750 a year. They want to sell their flat, but are having issues as very few mortgage companies will lend against this property when a buyer's affordability capacity is hampered so significantly by ground rent levels such as this. This particular leaseholder asked their freeholder for a quote to have the lease amended and a reduced ground rent. The freeholder flat out refused to negotiate. Why would they engage in negotiations? Ground rent is literally money for nothing for them. Meanwhile, my constituent is either stuck in a property that will only become more problematic over time, or they manage to sell it to someone else who will simply inherit the same issues. It's not solving the problem. Chair, the greatest irony here is that the leaseholder in question works as an estate agent. This so totally dispels the notion that all you need to avoid leasehold's fundamental flaws is to be savvy in the property market. I tell these stories to show how too common these are, and I know that the Minister is very engaged in these issues. The Leasehold and Freehold Reform Bill is the greatest opportunity in 30 years to put things right, and I support it, and I welcome it. Personally, I'd love to be more radical. I'd love to see all existing leaseholders in flats turned into common holders overnight, but I appreciate the complexities of doing so. So perhaps I could ask the Minister to mull or comment on a two-stage plan that even then I know is not going to happen overnight. The first will be to ensure all future flat sales come with a share of the freehold. This will be a much-needed stopgap until the second stage, the total abolition of leasehold ownership in this country and turning leaseholders into common holders. We should be committing to the total abolition of leasehold. It's time to be radical and ambitious and liberate millions of leaseholders from the myriad of issues they face. With an objective like this, we can turn millions of people into proper homeowners overnight. It would give current leaseholders more security and peaceable enjoyment and truly give them a proper stake in society. Thank you.
Shadow Minister Matthew Pennycook.
Thank you, Mrs Harris. It's an absolute pleasure to serve with you in the chair and to follow the Honourable Lady. And I'm very glad that she mentioned share of freehold, something that we pushed in committee stage and think is part of one of several measures that are necessary to pave the way for that common hold future that I think so many of us in this House want to see. Can I congratulate the Honourable Member for Harborough not only for securing this important debate and for opening it as compellingly as he did, but for the persuasive argument that he made at report stage of the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Bill yesterday in support of greater ambition when it comes to addressing the many iniquities of the leasehold system. While I disagree with his assertion in the debate yesterday that this is our one chance to end the arcane and discriminatory practices that leaseholders and residential freeholders are at the mercy of, it certainly represents our only chance in this Parliament, and we on these benches wholeheartedly agree that the government should go further than the current bill does. Mrs Harris, can I also thank all of the other members who have contributed to the debate this afternoon. I think they serve to highlight those contributions in a way that the debate did yesterday, that there's widespread support across the House for ambitious leasehold and common hold reform. And lastly, can I put on record once again the thanks of these benches to all those who have campaigned tirelessly, often over many decades, for an overhaul of leasehold law. In particular, I want to thank those leaseholders and residential freeholders who have resolutely refused to accept the iniquities of the flawed system that they are so often at the mercy of, and who have taken it upon themselves to vigorously make the case for change. Mrs Harrison, responding to this debate, I don't intend to revisit the many principled arguments and exchanges that took place yesterday in relation to leasehold reform generally. Instead, I simply will seek to provide some further detailed thoughts on some of the specific issues that have been raised this afternoon, starting with the management of private and mixed tenure estates. Now, the distinct set of problems faced by residential freeholders on these estates in respect of charges and fees is well known and well understood. The government have recognised publicly for at least 6 years that it is a very serious problem, and we welcome their decision to use the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Bill to introduce statutory protections for freehold homeowners equivalent to those enjoyed by long leaseholders in respect to service charges. Now, as the Minister will recall, we pressed in committee for specific changes to strengthen the new estate management regulatory framework, not least in terms of rectifying some of the obvious deficiencies of the existing leasehold regulation regime it merits, and we hope that the government will give them further consideration. Of particular importance, in our view, Mrs Harris, is the need to provide for a right-to-manage regime for freeholders on private and mixed tenure estates. It is not enough merely to give residential freeholders on these estates the right to challenge the reasonableness of charges and to hold estate management companies to account. They should enjoy the right to take over the management functions on their estate, and we believe there is appetite among freehold homeowners to exert more direct control in this way. In the report stage debate yesterday, the Minister made clear that the government understands the strength of feeling on this issue and are considering it further. So could I press the Minister today to provide a little more clarity and tell us whether or not the government are seriously considering bringing forward government amendments in the other place to provide for parity between residential leaseholders and freeholders when it comes to the right to manage. As the member for Harborough rightly argued yesterday, ensuring residential freeholders on existing private and mixed tenure estates are better protected is one thing. Reducing the prevalence of these arrangements is quite another. We take the view that the government must act to do so as the best way of addressing the root causes of so many of the problems that residential freeholders face. However, we believe it would be wrong simply to force local authorities to adopt such estates without corresponding changes to ensure that the public infrastructure and amenities on them are built to a determined adoptable standard, so that financially hard-pressed councils are not forced to repair, and maintain poor quality roads and common services at great cost. I'd be grateful if the Minister could provide some assurances, we touched on this in committee, that the Government are actively exploring a mix of legislative and policy changes that will be required to make progress on both of those fronts, adoption and common adoptable standards. Happy to give way.
Can I apologise to you, Madam Chair? I was meeting some Hong Kong people today in relation to human rights and freedom issues, so I apologise that I couldn't be here at the time I was to be here. So I thank you for letting me intervene, and to the Shadow Minister for that as well. Does the Honourable Member not agree that the leasehold reform has had much discussion, which it has in the Chamber the other day, but there's a real need for the reform of this issue urgently, because it affects so many of our constituencies, from young people who are starting their lives to older people who are trying to downsize, and that we really must make the changes at a time when every penny counts for most people, those young people and those older people.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that intervention. I was actually starting to get a little troubled when I couldn't see him out of the corner of my eye. I'm glad he's attended this debate and made that very well-made point, because our concern, and the honourable gentleman will know our position, I'm sure, our concern is that this bill doesn't go far enough by any means. It is a distinctly unambitious bill, but it does make important changes, and we think it is important that it receives royal assent before the end of the Parliament, and we want to see it, for the reasons he outlined, make the speedy progress that we all want to see happen. I was about to turn, Mrs Harris, to the issue of forfeiture, which the honourable gentleman raised in his opening remarks. Now, as honourable members will know, throughout the passage of the bill, we have made the principled case for abolishing forfeiture and the windfall it provides to freeholders. As I argued in the debate yesterday, forfeiture is a wholly disproportionate and horrifically draconian mechanism for ensuring compliance with a lease agreement. Its continued use and the chilling effect that results from its mere existence continues to put landlords, as I said yesterday, in a nearly unassailable position of strength in disputes with leaseholders, which is why it is routinely used by landlords as a first resort when seeking to recover alleged arrears of payments from leaseholders, and why the threat of it is invoked so often to deter leaseholders from disputing any unreasonable costs and defending claims. Now, the debate yesterday reinforced the fact there's clearly a broad consensus in the House for getting rid of it. While we're understandably disappointed that the Government resisted our second attempt to achieve this, we welcome the Minister making clear that the Government are, and I quote him, working through the detail of the issue and intend to report back to the House shortly. Can I encourage him to do so as quickly as possible and to provide us with assurances to that effect today? Determining precisely what, if anything, this House puts in place of the existing system of forfeiture is an extremely complicated undertaking. Given that the Government have had years to develop considered proposals in this area, it would be unfortunate if honourable members are asked to take a view on complex and technical proposals without the time necessary to properly scrutinise them. As the Minister considers the matter of forfeiture, can I also press him to review the issue of rent charges? And I'm very glad that Father of the House, and I think the honourable gentleman, mentioned these in their contributions. We must, of course, ensure that there are no unintended consequences, but in our view, there is a cast-iron case for abolishing Section 121 of the 1925 Law of Property Act altogether. The remedies provided for by the Act, which amount in essence to freehold forfeiture, are a wholly disproportionate and draconian legacy of Victorian-era property law. Through Clause 83 of the Bill, the Government is seeking to make palatable methods of enforcing legitimate and reasonable rent charges that are simply not justifiable in any form. They must be removed, and I urge the Minister to reconsider the Government's position on them. Before I conclude, Mrs Harris, can I touch very briefly on the issue of ground rents, which the Honourable Lady mentioned. As we argued in committee, over the past 2 decades, we've seen a system develop that is increasingly focused on generating assets by gouging leaseholders through ground rents that are, in historical terms, high to start with and that escalate over the terms of the lease. Leaseholders who've worked hard to purchase their homes in good faith are being asked to pay ever more money for no clear service in return, and many are experiencing considerable financial distress and difficulty selling their property, all to sustain the income streams of third-party investors. Unregulated ground rents of this nature in existing leases cannot be justified in our view, and as I previously made clear, I personally share the Secretary of State's preference to cap ground rent at a peppercorn. Now, while we don't discount the risks involved in any of the 5 options outlined in the recent government consultation, Labour is clear that the government must act to protect leaseholders from ground rent exploitation, and that they should be, as I said in committee, courageous in determining which of the consultation proposals should be enacted. Now, the Minister made clear in yesterday's debate that the government are considering next steps. and we're moving at speed in doing so. I'm not going to press him this afternoon for any further details, except he won't be able to say any more today. But can I press upon him again, as I did in relation to forfeiture, the need to share any detailed proposals with the House at the earliest possible stage, particularly given the implications of the range of options consulted on for the bill that has now been sent to the other place. It will, as he knows, involve the rewriting of several substantive clauses in the bill. We need that detail early on. I look forward to the Minister's response.
Minister Lee Rowley.
Thank you, Mrs Harris, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and thank you to all members who have contributed today, and indeed to those who are listening or to the debate. This is an important issue. It's obviously an important issue because we're talking about it twice in 2 days, if for nothing other reason, but because I think it is clear, as we talked about yesterday, honourable members on all sides of the House recognise that this is an area which needs attention. They recognise it's an area which is in bad need of reform, and thankfully the general consensus that we need to move in that direction is one as a principle across the House, and so I'm hoping that the bill, which has now gone to the other place as of yesterday, will make fast progress there. I want to start just making a couple of points. Firstly, just to be clear, the government absolutely acknowledges the issue here. We did it yesterday, we did it in committee, a second reading, and before. Honourable members have made some very important points both today and when they have raised similar issues previously about the iniquities in the system, about the historic problems that have been brought both on the leasehold side and more recently, but just as iniquitously, on the estate management side. And it is right, even for those of us who believe that government should be very temperate in terms of its interventions in markets, that where markets aren't working, that we take action in order to try and straighten those markets out and remove the distortions within them. And that is exactly why we've brought forward this bill, and why we hope it will make the progress that we are trying to ensure it does over the course of the months ahead, and why we welcome the opposition's commitment to trying to get this on the statute book at the earliest possible opportunity. There are problems absolutely within the leasehold part of the discussion. The estate management issues, which have clearly come into much sharper relief just over the last couple of decades, in which many of us, particularly those who have had significant amounts of new building in their areas, can see now on a day-to-day basis in individual estates. There's clearly a set of issues which need to be resolved there. And then more broadly, as my honourable friend from Harborough outlined, there is a particular issue with regards to new homes, which I will talk about in a moment, because both honourable members from Harborough and Selby and Ainsty touched on this specifically. But I will just, without rehearsing some of the arguments, some of the discussions which have been made previously, I do just want to read into the record for about a minute the real progress which is being made in this bill. It is important as a House and with the other place that we do not baseline and forget that we are making the biggest and most significant change to property law in this country in a generation, and that is something which we absolutely need to acknowledge, and that includes making it cheaper and easier for leaseholders in both houses and flats to extend their lease or to buy their freehold. That is a significant intervention. Increasing the standard lease extension term from just 90 years to 990 years, that is an extremely significant intervention, and with ground rent reduced to 0. Removing the requirement for a new leaseholder to have owned their house or flat for 2 years before they can benefit from these changes. Changing the thresholds, changing the non-residential limits within properties, and allowing leaseholders in buildings with up to 50% non-residential floor space to buy their freehold for the first time or to take over its management. Adding protections on top of the Building Safety Act, which we introduced at report stage yesterday. Making the purchase and the selling of leasehold and freehold estates properties quicker and easier by providing a maximum time and fee for the provision of information. Vitally requiring transparency over leasehold service charges, which was talked about a moment ago by honourable members. Replacing buildings insurance commissions for managing agents, landlords and freeholders, so we get away from the frankly outrageous situation today where there is little clarity about what is being paid for, who is paying for it, and whether there are kickbacks in the background. Scrapping the presumption for leaseholders to pay their freeholders' legal costs when challenging poor practice. Another absolutely outrageous and historic iniquity which needs resolution. And extending redress schemes, quite rightly, to managed estates. And whilst I know some honourable members in this place and honourable friends would prefer them to be abolished, it is absolutely right that there is a redress scheme in place. And then, as honourable members know, yesterday banning the creation of new leasehold houses, as somebody who does not like to ban anything at all, because I think we've banned far too much in the United Kingdom over the past generation. I am absolutely convinced, sadly convinced, but absolutely convinced of the necessity that we need a preclusion on leasehold houses, given what we have seen and given some of the horror stories that have been outlined both during the passage of this bill and in the years above it. Happily give way.
Matthew Pennycook.
I hope he's about to turn and agree with me about the necessity of only banning very proportionately.
But I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappoint him, because I disagree that the government yesterday banned new leasehold houses. I don't think he addressed it in his wind-up speech yesterday. He didn't have a huge amount of time. But I'd like his response to the concerns I outlined about new Schedule 2 providing for exemptions that are potentially so wide that they will allow the creation of significant numbers of new leasehold homes over the coming years. Will the government review its position on new Schedule 2? Is it convinced that they are only the very limited exceptions in unusual circumstances he spoke about yesterday?
Minister Rowley.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman's intervention. I know we've spoken about this. I know that the Honourable Gentleman and I have an active discussion about this, and possibly a slight difference of opinion about potential impact of what we brought forward. I think, I do not wish to misrepresent him, he accepts that there are some elements of what we brought forward yesterday, possibly national trust elements, that are not controversial and not contentious. So there's this question about historically if organisations or entities or companies have got agreements in certain ways, whether or not it should be applied to those or not. I mean, I think it is clear that going forward this is being swept away, and we are having effectively a discussion about whether or not those that already have permissions on a particular type of prospectus, whether or not that should be swept away as well, other than the very small number of things like national trust. That is something I'm sure we will continue to talk about, but we do think that the proposition is significant. We do think it's a major intervention. We do think it honours the spirit of banning leasehold houses. I know that others may take a different view, but I think the government is of the view that this is a significant step forward, and one which does adhere to, as I say, to the spirit of that ban or that preclusion, which will allow us to move forward. Having highlighted the progress which I think has been made and is being made, subject to what the other place do, I know that there is, as we've already talked about here, and the honourable members are very keen that we go further on areas. And I just want to spend a few moments going through some of the suggestions which honourable members have brought forward and try to give some time to them. My honourable friend from Harborough made a very powerful speech, and again is the source and the reason why we are speaking about this again today, and it's important that we continue to have this conversation. And it is absolutely the case that on some of the examples both named and referred to, that when you hear of the realities of what this system creates. No system is perfect. You can never design something so there won't be some attempt to prang it in some way, shape or form. But there is clearly large holes in this system that are built up or being exploited, which have resulted in the removal of trees from a tree-lined street, which just has no, unless there's some other reality behind it, there is absolutely no reason for that to happen. And we have to move into a place where that is. Where that doesn't occur in the future. So we hope that the combination of the changes which we are bringing forward within the bill at the current time, and we have also been very clear that we recognise there are further concerns, and we are working through we are considering that further. But I think we would all agree that some of the examples that have been brought forward are not where we want to be, and I hope we may be able to say something more on that going forward. And I also, as I mentioned very briefly yesterday, also recognise this personally. I'm not speaking here today as a constituency MP, but I have seen only in the last month, I have been in meetings with my own constituents who have raised concerns about, in this instance, a persimmon development and about the clarity and the information that has been provided for the service charges there. And so I see in my own part of the world the similar issues to the ones that have been raised by honourable members and the honourable member for Harborough. The honourable member for Harborough also raises the important point about GP provision. And this is something that I recognise, having been in this job now for 4 months, that this is something where our honourable friends from South West Bedfordshire is particularly concerned about this. I've spoken to an honourable friend from Hertford and Stortford about this previously. It is another clear iniquity where if people who are doing the right thing, as my honourable friend for Harborough says, people who have worked hard all their lives, are coming and are buying properties, and those properties contain sales particulars which say new GP provision will be on or near that site, and then suddenly that provision disappears into thin air between the point when the ink goes on the contract and then when they actually move in, or within a few years of that. That is something which we've already held a meeting with the Department for Health and Social Care with my honourable friend from South Northamptonshire, who is the Minister in that department, and we are committed to trying to make further progress on it. I think there is a detailed discussion which is needed there about. There is a number of different issues which need to be unpacked with regards to GP provision. One, the physical ability to provide bricks, places for people to operate out of, which is obviously the responsibility of the planning system or associated with it. Secondly, whether some provision could be provided, but for whatever reason, the configurations, the preferred designs, whatever is making that cost higher than it otherwise should be, which, if that is the case, that needs to be looked into again, because there is no reason for making perfect the enemy of the good. And then third, is you may have the bricks, or you may have the provision to provide the bricks, but if you don't have the people within it to provide the services, then it doesn't help in any instance the people who have been sold the promise in the first place. So there's a number of different issues in there which all need to be unpicked, and I'm working with my honourable friend from the Department for Health on that. My honourable friend also from Harbour talks at length and passionately, importantly, about the new homes and the issues that have been seen there. And as he indicated, having done the right thing, it is absolutely incredible, absolutely unacceptable for the kinds of problems that he has highlighted around sewage and around snagging and around the changes which people are having to, the amount of time people are having to take to get their homes up to a standard which they thought they were buying in the first place, or the problems which they didn't think would come forward. It is unacceptable. It is fair to say that as MPs we only hear about the difficult issues, and there are many homeowners and many thousands of homeowners who move into homes on a monthly and an annual basis who don't have these issues, and that is absolutely great. But we can all see within our postbags that there are significant challenges with regards to new homes. And as he indicates, I hope the new home ombudsman will make progress, and the new homes quality board at the current time is also seeking to do that. I also want to turn to my honourable friend from Gravesham's point, who's no longer in his place. He raises a very important point about conveyancing. It was also, I think, the honourable gentleman from Selby and Ainsty made the similar point about the reality that people were being encouraged to use a particular conveyancer or a particular set of solicitors, and that there may be that part of that process, however it happened, the output of that process means that they didn't get all of the information, or certain things were not as clear as they could be, and that is unacceptable. I recognise it's an issue. We have to work through whether there's a very complicated interaction there between standards and regulation, and whether people are doing the right thing even within a regulated industry. And I think it is something that I should pick up with my colleagues in the Ministry of Justice to see whether there is anything that we may be able to take forward with regards to that. The honourable gentleman from Selby and Ainsty made an important and eloquent case about some of the challenges which he has experienced and his constituents have experienced in Selby and Ainsty. I think I was campaigning on one of his new estates just a few months ago, possibly for a different candidate. I'll make 2 points, if I may. He raised a particular issue with regards to Harron Homes, and I say this not to make any particular point other than I had a similar personal and constituency issue with Harron Homes on the Regent Green estate in Grassmore in my constituency a number of years ago. It took quite a bit of pushing, but in the end Harron Homes did move, and we did get hundreds of snags unsnagged, and so I hope he has a similar success on that. But I know the point he is making is not seeking advice about how to approach Harron Homes, but more broadly about the reality that this shouldn't happen in the first place. And he's absolutely right that shouldn't happen. I hope that some of the work that is both within this bill and then some of the things the New Homes Quality Board is doing on a voluntary basis and the New Homes Ombudsman will do in the coming years ahead will help to address some of those problems. Turning to my honourable friend from Worthing West, who has been is not just the father of the house, but the father of many of these father of many of these innovations and suggestions within the bill today, given how long he has campaigned on this issue before. He raises the specific point about rent charges, and I say to him, I'm always happy to hold roundtables. We have to make sure that they have a utility. I think that we're clearly making progress in this bill, and I hope honourable members would accept that there is progress on rent charges in this bill. And I know that both myself and Secretary of State continue to be keen to have the discussion around rent charges to see what may be possible in the future. There is a complicated interaction, and it is important to know, as there always is in these very difficult areas of law, there is a complicated interaction between clear problems with regards to rent charges and the things that we see that are a problem, and then the overall structure of how rent charges are used on a broader basis. Rent charges are, for example, part of the estate management system, and it is something that we have to try and work through in the round. But always happy to talk more, always happy to hold roundtables on it, and we do understand that there continues to be a challenge here. Of course I would.
Sir Peter Bottomley.
And I should have said that I am a leaseholder. But say were one of my grandchildren to be buying a freehold property where there's a requirement to pay charges, the idea that the rent charge holder can, if there's a slip in paying the charge, turn a freehold property into a 99-year lease, which may knock hundreds of thousands of pounds off the value of a London property, is absurd. So the sooner we can have the round table, followed by action, the better. Please.
I think my honourable friend makes an important point about the current system, and I look forward to continue to discussing that with him and those who are interested in this area and wish to see further progress. Just before I conclude, my honourable friend from Hertford and Stortford made a clear point about the importance of clarity and information for leaseholders. I hope that she may have seen, particularly on leasehold houses, that given the preclusion that we are bringing forward, we have also added in additional clauses within this bill, which makes clear that it is absolutely imperative that there is explicit clarity about whether leasehold houses are being still sold in the limited instances where we think it is proportionate to do so. So there is no ability in the future, from a house perspective, for people to not know what they are buying because people choose not to make that clear in the process. And then the honourable gentleman from Greenwich and Woolwich, we have rehearsed many of these points already, so I will not seek to detain honourable members longer. He raises forfeiture, and as I've said, and as I happily repeat here again, we are working through the detail of this issue. We are very serious and recognise that it is an important issue, an issue which the House has indicated it has a very strong view on already, and we hope to be able to say something more on that shortly. And I saw yesterday, after we had the number of divisions, I saw quite a lot on Twitter. I do read Twitter, a lot of disappointment about the choice on forfeiture, and I just want to assure people who may be looking at the Hansard on this afterwards or watching this online that the government is absolutely serious about this. It has been clear that it is looking at this seriously, and I hope we will be able to say something more. And whilst I understand that many of us have been in this place for a number of years now, and there is some arcanity, if that is a word, there is an arcaneness to some of the procedures, and sometimes things do not appear exactly in the linear and sequential order that people would like, I can assure people who have interest in this that the government is looking seriously at this, and I hope to be able to report back to the House shortly on this. And then finally, just to thank the Honourable Lady from Battersea, who's no longer in her place, who raised important points about leasehold, and the Honourable Gentleman from Strangford, as ever, who highlighted the importance of reform in general for this, and one of the reasons why we are bringing this forward and seeking to make as strong progress as possible. So, recognising the very useful contributions today, building upon the report stage yesterday and the progress that this has made in the House already, I hope that honourable members who have been both in this debate today and part of the process so far recognise that this is a strong proposition which the government has brought forward. It is the biggest change in a generation to property law. I recognise, and the government recognises, the desire of members here and the House in general to go further. We have said very clearly that we are looking at a number of areas, and my Secretary of State, my boss, the person who ultimately makes the choice, has indicated very clearly he is keen to improve this bill further. We will not be able to do everything, as I said, in committee stage. There is always a discussion and always a decision about how we prioritise the limited time that this House and the other place has But we do think this is a strong start. We hope we will be able to improve it further, and we look forward to being able to make real progress on this important area, which has needed reform for so long, and which finally, after 20 years, we're able to deliver as part of this bill. Thank you.
Neil O'Brien to wind up.
Well, thank you, Mrs Harris. Thank you for chairing this session, and thank you to all the honourable members who made interesting and important contributions during this afternoon's debate. The member for Gravesham raised this issue about the conveyancing being done by someone tied to the developer and the bad incentives that sets up. The honourable member for Selby and Ainsty, while welcoming the action on maintenance charges, also gave us a terrifying example of some constituents getting maintenance charges but no actual maintenance. The father of the house raised the case of Terry Woodgetts, and I really like the idea that he raised of the idea of a bond. I've long thought that instead of councils having to take developers to court for infringements of planning conditions and the conditions of building, it would be much simpler if the onus was reversed, that a bond was held by the council that was only released if developers did the right thing during the development process. And the honourable member, my honourable friend for Hertford and Stortford, made this important point about people only finding out terms once it was too late. They'd either pay the deposit or the whack, and how even quite sophisticated people like estate agents can end up being trapped by this complex system. Just to end on a moment of light, this has been a debate in which I've raised lots of harrowing cases, and lots of other members have done the same thing. I am struck, though, when I think about this document that I wrote in 2018, that although politics, particularly this field, is not for the impatient, it is possible to make progress here, and we are making progress. Actually, an example of that is leasehold houses. The promise alone that we were going to take the legislative action that we are now taking has actually driven down the number of leasehold houses very dramatically over recent years. I raised the issue about getting new GP surgeries in new estates. We've already made progress on that through the new NPPF guidance, the new NPPF. The conversation is continuing, and it's not a straightforward one. And the Minister is right to both read into the record the different elements of progress that have been made already in this legislation, and also highlight the complexity and the fact that it's not straightforward to make further progress. But just to have that moment of optimism as well to end on, if I think about writing about things like the transparency of land options in 2018, you know, I published my paper in 2018 as a minister in the department in 2021, made the case for us putting in legislation. We legislated in 2023. We'll be doing the secondary legislation in 2024. It takes a long time to do things, but we do eventually get there. If I think about arguing for capturing more land value for the community, something they do brilliantly in Hong Kong, where an honourable member for Strangford has been communicating with people whose human rights are being violated there. One thing they've always done there well is capture land value for the community. We're making progress on that through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, not just the new infrastructure levy that will be rolling out over the coming years, but also the new CPO powers, which I look forward to being used. If I think about the arguments I have been making for a long time about building in the wrong places without the right infrastructure, again, we've made progress on that, in whether it's the urban uplift to the OAN that came in a few years ago, or the moves to liberalise brownfield development that have been mooted more recently. We have made progress towards all these things. There's still a lot to do, and when I talk about the broken planning system, we are making progress towards it being less broken than it was, but there is still a lot to do. And I take from this story of progress and the story of a lot of things needing fixing an optimistic point, which is simply that although there is a lot for the Minister to do, and it's not easy to make progress on these things, we have already made good progress, and we have another opportunity to make some big strides forward through this legislation. And I'm encouraged not just that he is there as an able and brilliant Minister, but encouraged by his words today that we will be taking the opportunity to go further on these things, which have caused such a lot of grief for my constituents, and which we can fix. These are issues that we can fix.
Question is that this House has considered leasehold reform and new homes. As many are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. This sitting now stands adjourned until 4 p.m. Order.